On today's episode, Donald Trump is going to Mars, Blue Origin returns from sea, Europe prepares for liftoff, and investors get stoked about space. Donald Trump is back as president of the USA, and he is again putting space exploration among his top priorities, with some early indications that this term will be even more ambitious than the last. Included in the president's inauguration speech was the line, quote, "We will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars." Now, Trump isn't the first president to talk about sending Americans to Mars, and he won't be the last either, but in a long line of figureheads who talk big about space exploration, there are very few who have actually done anything meaningful about it. Donald Trump is one of those few. If we use his first term from 2017 to 2021 as a reference, we've got some pretty significant and lasting impacts. The Artemis program was a call to action for NASA to land Americans on the moon by 2024. That didn't happen, but the sense of urgency coming from Trump and then Vice President Pence did trigger a level of progress at NASA that we have not often seen. Trump's new pick to lead NASA is Jared Isaacman, probably best known for his ambitions in the private spaceflight industry. Isaacman has funded and led 2 missions to low Earth orbit using SpaceX hardware, including the most recent Polaris Dawn, where Jared himself performed the first ever spacewalk from a Dragon capsule using a SpaceX EVA suit. That was cool, but it was also an exceptionally dangerous thing for him to do, so we should be expecting to see a new NASA that is both ambitious and unafraid to take big risks. Trump also resurrected the National Space Council in his previous term, something that had disappeared in the early 90s. The council is traditionally led by the vice president, so that role should transfer to J.D. Vance in the coming weeks. The Space Council typically consists of top officials from the State Department, Defense, Commerce, Transportation, and National Security. And the function is to get these departments at the same table, working together under direct, unified leadership of the president. Of course, we have the Space Force, a new space-based branch of the military that was created at the order of Donald Trump. It's not like the military wasn't already interested in space, but that was all handled within the US Air Force. Now it's been broken off into a dedicated operation, and we might be seeing the Space Force play a much bigger role in national security over the years to come. Just last week, the outgoing Air Force Secretary, Frank Kendall, delivered a pretty stark report to Congress, basically warning that the US military presence in space needs to step up fast in order to counter a rapidly growing threat from China and Russia. Kendall projected that by the end of the year 2050, space will become the primary theater for almost all military operations, which will need to be powered by autonomous machine-based systems. Trump's own pick for Secretary of the Air Force, who still oversees the Space Force, will be Troy Meek. Troy is an Air Force veteran himself, but he's also managed ballistic missile testing programs in the past, so he knows a lot about rockets. And most recently, he's been Deputy Director of the National Reconnaissance Office, which is responsible for America's network of spy satellites. And then there's Elon Musk, who could not physically contain his excitement when Donald Trump spoke about sending people to Mars. Technically, Elon doesn't have a direct role in the government's space exploration, but his Department of Government Efficiency could presumably have a lot of overlap into this area. There's never been a Doge before, so who knows what it actually does, but it definitely puts Elon in a position where he can have a lot of influence over government contracts. Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos has already come out to say that he doesn't think Elon will use this new power to unfairly advantage SpaceX. Jeff Bezos also said, quote, "I could be wrong about that, but I think it could be true." While much of Trump's initial movement has been towards cutting back spending and shrinking the size of government activity, the space-based defense industry and outer space exploration stands to receive a pretty significant boost here. That's going to drive growth in the industry. Needless to say, I don't think we're going to have any shortage of material to cover on the show once things really start to get rolling. Now, turning to Blue Origin, where we've just seen the return of the Jacqueline landing platform from its time at Sea. This is where the company had been hoping to successfully retrieve their New Glenn rocket booster, but we can see that the Jacqueline has returned both empty and unscathed. Blue Origin have remained very tight-lipped about the fate of their first New Glenn booster, which they named "So You're Telling Me There's a Chance," basically playing into how unlikely it would be to actually land the booster on the first attempt, and the company did report that they lost said booster, but also wouldn't get into details about what exactly happened to it. We were hoping that the return of the landing platform might reveal something new. Maybe it would be towing New Glenn wreckage along with it, or maybe the deck of the ship would be scarred from an explosive landing failure, much like what we've seen many times before from SpaceX with their Falcon 9. But we got nothing. Jacqueline looks to be in the exact same condition as she was when she left, so whatever happened to New Glenn, it didn't go down on the landing platform. But we should be finding out those details in good time, because the FAA has ordered a mishap investigation into the New Glenn rocket booster and its failed return to Earth. While the payload itself did reach a successful orbit and is currently flying as high as 19,000 kilometers above the Earth, the booster seems to have lost contact right at the tail end of a 3-engine re-entry burn. The vehicle was at an altitude of 25 kilometers and traveling at a velocity of 7,000 kilometers per hour. Speaking of first times though, we might be soon seeing the first ever vertical rocket launch from the European continent. Rocket Factory Augsburg is a German rocket company who have built their Saxevord spaceport on one of the Shetland Islands, which are located off the northern tip of Scotland, and they've just been granted a spaceflight operator's license by the UK Civil Aviation Authority. You might remember this particular launch complex from last year when a booster static fire went catastrophically wrong and exploded into a towering inferno. Fortunately, the company has bounced back quickly and is now approved for up to 10 orbital launches per year, with no more than 2 launches within 1 month. RFA is currently on track to make the first test flight of their one rocket in 2025. The vehicle's second and third stage have already been flight qualified, so it's just a matter of getting the booster and its 9 Helix engines to perform as desired. Back in the USA now, Stoke Space is hot off a new funding round that added $260 million to the rocket startup's operating budget. The Seattle, Washington-based rocket maker is pursuing an ambitious goal of creating a fully reusable 2-stage rocket. That's in line with what SpaceX is doing with their Starship, only Stoke is thinking a lot smaller. Their Nova rocket would be a medium-lift vehicle with a capacity of around 3 metric tons to low Earth orbit. Stoke recently performed test firings of their new Zenith engine, which is a methane-burning, full-flow staged combustion cycle engine. There will be 7 of these powering the Nova first-stage booster. Again, it's pretty similar to what SpaceX has developed for their Starship. The Raptor engine is the world's first full-flow staged combustion engine, and in its current iteration makes around 5 times more thrust than the 100,000 pounds of the Zenith. Stoke has also been pushing forward with testing of their Nova upper stage, which is not like anything we've seen before. It would use a metallic heat shield that is actively cooled by cryogenic liquid hydrogen, and then it's using a ring of small thrusters to complete a propulsive vertical landing. Stoke CEO Andy Lapsa said that the $260 million will go towards completing development of the Nova and renovating Launch Complex 14A at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The company expects to have their launch site completed by the end of this year, but declined to provide an estimate on when the first launch attempt might happen. He added that the company now has enough money to carry through the rocket's development phase and into later operations.